You've got $5,000 sitting in your savings account right now. You know you should invest it. You've known you should invest it for months, maybe years. But every time you think about actually doing it, your brain just freezes. Because what if you pick the wrong stocks? What if you buy right before a crash? What if you need that money and it's all tied up in some investment you don't understand? So the money just sits there, earning 0.5% interest, losing value to inflation every single day. And you feel guilty about it, but not guilty enough to actually do anything. My name is Drew, and I spend way too much time thinking about why smart people make terrible investing decisions. If you're someone who understands that investing is important, who's read all the articles and watched all the videos, but who still hasn't actually started because it feels overwhelmingly complicated, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Because I'm about to show you that everything you think makes investing hard is actually just noise designed to keep you paralyzed and poor. Now look, I know what you're thinking. Drew, investing is complicated. There are thousands of stocks, hundreds of funds, all these different strategies, technical analysis, fundamental analysis, market timing, diversification. How is that simple? And here's the thing. You're right. Investing can be complicated, but it doesn't have to be. And the reason you think it has to be is because there's an entire industry that makes billions of dollars convincing you it's too complex for normal people to handle. Let me tell you something that's going to sound crazy. The investing industry doesn't want you to know how simple good investing actually is. Because if you figured out that you could build serious wealth with three incredibly boring decisions that take about 45 minutes to implement, an entire ecosystem of financial advisors, stock pickers, newsletter writers, and actively managed funds would lose their revenue stream. Here's what most people don't realize. The complexity isn't there to help you make better decisions. It's there to make you feel like you need help. It's there to make you think that investing requires special knowledge, special skills, special access. And that feeling, that sense that you're not qualified to manage your own money, keeps you either paralyzed and not investing at all, or constantly churning through strategies and losing money on fees. This is where it gets interesting because there's actual research on this. Vanguard did a study analyzing investor returns over a 15-year period. They found that the average investor in actively managed funds earned about 3.7% annually. You know what the market returned during that same period? About 8.5% annually. The average investor underperformed the market by almost 5% every single year. But here's the kicker. It wasn't because they picked bad funds. It wasn't because they didn't do enough research. It was because they did too much. They were constantly trying to time the market, switching between funds, chasing performance, reacting to news. All that activity, all that complexity they introduced trying to be smart, cost them almost half their potential returns. Now you might be thinking, okay, Drew, but surely the professionals do better, right? The people who spend 80 hours a week analyzing companies and markets? Wrong. Spectacularly wrong. There's this thing called the SPIVA scorecard that tracks how professional fund managers perform against the market. Over the last 15 years, about 90% of actively managed large-cap funds underperformed the S&P 500. Let me say that again. 9 out of 10 professional investors, people who do this for a living, people with teams of analysts and Bloomberg terminals and insider access, they couldn't beat a simple index fund. And it gets worse. The ones who do beat the market in any given year, they're almost never the same ones who beat it the next year. A study from Standard & Poor's found that of the funds in the top quartile of performance over a 5-year period, only about 4% stayed in the top quartile over the next 5 years. It's basically random. You'd have better odds throwing darts at a list of funds. So if the professionals can't do it, and the average person trying to be smart about it underperforms, then who's actually making money? Here's the answer, and this is going to make you mad. The people who do almost nothing. Let me give you a real example. There's a famous story about an investment portfolio that was set up in 1997 as an experiment. The portfolio was simple. 60% U.S. stocks, 40% bonds using index funds. The rules were even simpler. Rebalance once a year, never make any other changes, ignore all market news. That portfolio was literally forgotten about. The person managing it died, and no one touched it for years. When they finally found it and checked the performance, it had outperformed about 85% of professionally managed portfolios because it never sold in a panic, never chased hot stocks, never tried to time the market. It just sat there, boring and simple, compounding steadily. This is what most people don't realize. Complexity in investing isn't a feature, it's a bug. Every additional decision you make, every stock you pick, every time you try to be clever, you're probably making things worse, not better. Here's the thing that blew my mind when I finally understood it. Good investing isn't about making smart decisions constantly. It's about making a few simple decisions once and then having the discipline to do nothing. And that doing nothing part, that's where everyone fails. Because doing nothing feels irresponsible. It feels lazy. It feels like you're not optimizing. So people tinker. They adjust. They rebalance too often. They read articles about the 10 stocks to buy now and convince themselves that this time they've found the edge everyone else is missing. There's actually a term for this in behavioral economics: action bias. It's the tendency to feel like doing something is better than doing nothing, even when doing nothing is objectively the better choice. Investors suffer from action bias more than almost any other group. The market drops 5%, they feel like they need to do something. A stock they don't own goes up 20%, they feel like they're missing out and need to jump in. But here's what the data shows. The more you trade, the worse you do. There was a study from the University of California that tracked 66,000 households over a 5-year period. The households that traded the most, the ones who were most actively trying to beat the market, they underperformed the market by about 6.5% annually. The households that traded the least, they basically matched the market minus small fees. Now look, I can see some of you getting frustrated. Okay, Drew, so what's the actual answer? What am I supposed to do? And this is where it gets beautiful, because the answer is almost embarrassingly simple. Here it is. Buy a total stock market index fund. Set up automatic investments every month. Don't look at it. That's it. That's the whole strategy. But Drew, you're saying, that can't be it. What about international diversification? What about bonds? What about my age and risk tolerance and time horizon? Okay, fine. You want a slightly more sophisticated version? Here it is. Put a percentage of your money in a total U.S. stock market index fund, a percentage in a total international stock market index fund, and a percentage in a total bond market index fund. The younger you are, the more in stocks. The older you are, the more in bonds. Rebalance once a year? Done. That's it. That's the entire strategy that will likely outperform 90% of investors over the long term. You could implement this in literally 45 minutes. Create an account at Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab, pick 3 index funds, set up automatic investments, and never think about it again, except for 1 day a year when you rebalance. Now you might be thinking, this seems too simple. Surely I need to do more than that. And this is exactly the psychological trap I'm talking about. You feel like you need to do more because simple doesn't feel sophisticated. It doesn't feel like you're being smart with your money. It feels like you're being lazy. But here's what most people don't realize. Simplicity in investing isn't laziness, it's wisdom. Because every layer of complexity you add is another opportunity for emotion and bias and mistakes to creep in. Let me give you another example. My friend David started investing about the same time I did, roughly 10 years ago. I went the simple route, 3-fund portfolio, automatic investments, basically ignored it. David went the smart route. He subscribed to investment newsletters, he watched CNBC, he had spreadsheets tracking dozens of individual stocks, he was constantly adjusting his portfolio based on market conditions. We compared returns recently. Over 10 years, his annualized return was about 5.8%. Mine was about 9.2%. The difference, I did less. Way less. I spent maybe 2 hours a year on my investments. He spent probably 5 hours a week. He worked hundreds of times harder and got significantly worse results. And here's the thing that really got to him. It wasn't that he picked terrible stocks. Some of his picks did great, but he sold them too early because he got nervous. Or he held on to losers too long because he was waiting for them to come back. Or he sat in cash during a rally because he thought the market was overvalued. All of that activity, all of that being smart, cost him about 3.5% annually in missed returns. This is where it gets even more interesting, because there's a psychological reason why complexity feels safer than simplicity. It's called the illusion of control. When you're actively making decisions, you feel like you have control over the outcome. You feel like you're managing risk. But in investing, that feeling of control is usually just an illusion that causes you to make worse decisions. The market is going to do what it's going to do, regardless of how much time you spend analyzing it. Companies are going to succeed or fail based on factors you can't predict or control. Economic cycles are going to happen. And all of your research and analysis and clever stock picking, it's mostly just noise that makes you feel productive while actually making you poor. Here's what most people don't realize. The reason investing feels hard is because you're trying to do the hard version. You're trying to pick individual stocks, or time the market, or find the next Amazon. And yes, that is hard. It's nearly impossible, actually. Even the professionals can't do it consistently. But nobody said you have to do the hard version. The easy version. Buy the whole market, hold forever, ignore the noise. That version works better than the hard version. And it requires almost no knowledge, no special skills, no constant attention. Now you might be thinking, but what about crashes? What if I invest right before the market drops 40%? And look, this is a valid concern. Market crashes happen. They're scary. But here's what the data shows. Even if you had the worst timing in history and invested at the peak right before every major crash over the last 50 years, you'd still be way ahead today if you just held on and kept investing. There's this famous example of Bob, the world's worst market timer. Bob invested $6,000 right before the 1973 crash. Then he invested another $6,000 right before the 1987 crash. Then $6,000 right before the 2000 dot-com crash. Then $6,000 right before the 2008 financial crisis. Literally the worst possible timing. You know what his portfolio was worth in 2013? Over $1.1 million. Because he never sold. He just held on through the crashes and kept investing. Compare that to his friend who tried to time the market, who sold during the crashes and waited for things to feel safe before buying back in. That friend had way less money because he kept missing the recoveries. This is what most people don't realize. The biggest risk in investing isn't picking the wrong funds. It's not even buying at the wrong time. The biggest risk is getting scared and selling, or never starting at all because you're waiting for the right time. Here's the thing about waiting for the right time. It never comes. There's always a reason to wait. The market is at all-time highs. There's an election coming up. There's a recession brewing. There's geopolitical uncertainty. If you wait for all the uncertainty to go away before you invest, you'll never invest. But here's what you should actually be scared of. Inflation. Every year you leave money in a savings account earning 0.5% while inflation is running at 3%. You're losing 2.5% of your purchasing power. That $5,000 you're keeping safe in savings, in 10 years, it'll only buy what $3,800 buys today. You're not protecting yourself. You're guaranteeing you'll be poor. Now look, I'm not saying you should take your entire life savings and dump it into stocks tomorrow. I'm not saying you shouldn't have an emergency fund in cash. What I'm saying is that money you don't need for the next 5+ years should be invested. And the way to invest it is simple, not complex. Here's exactly what I want you to do. First, open an account at a low-cost brokerage. I don't care which one. Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, they're all fine. This will take you about 15 minutes. Second, decide on a simple asset allocation. If you're young and have decades until retirement, maybe it's 80% stocks, 20% bonds. If you're older or more conservative, maybe it's 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Don't overthink this. Just pick something reasonable. Third, choose your funds. For stocks, get a total U.S. stock market index fund and a total international stock market index fund. For bonds, get a total bond market index fund. At Vanguard, these would be VTI, VXUS, and BND. At Fidelity, it's FSKAX, FTIHX, and FXNAX. Literally just 3 funds. Fourth, set up automatic investments. Decide on an amount you can afford every month and have it automatically invested in those three funds according to your allocation. This removes all emotion and decision-making from the process. Fifth, and this is the most important part, forget about it. Don't check your balance every day. Don't read articles about hot stocks. Don't panic when the market drops. Just let it sit there and compound. Once a year, look at your allocation. If it's drifted too far from your target, like your stocks went up a lot and now you're 85% stocks instead of 80%, rebalance by selling some stocks and buying some bonds. That's it. That's the only active management you ever need to do. Now you might be thinking, this seems too simple to actually work. And that's exactly my point. The financial industry has spent decades convincing you that investing requires expertise because expertise can be monetized. But the data is clear. Simple beats complex almost every time. There's a reason Warren Buffett, literally one of the greatest investors of all time, has instructed that when he dies, his wife's inheritance should be invested in a simple S&P 500 index fund, not in Berkshire Hathaway stock, not in a complex portfolio of individual stocks, a boring index fund. Because even Warren Buffett knows that for most people, simple is better. Here's what most people don't realize. The complexity in investing isn't there to help you make better returns. It's there to make other people money. Every time you buy an actively managed fund, you're paying fees that drag down your returns. Every time you trade individual stocks, you're paying commissions and spreads. Every time you work with a financial advisor who charges 1% annually, you're giving away a huge chunk of your potential wealth. Let me show you the math on that, because this is where it gets scary. Let's say you invest $500 a month for 30 years. If you earn the market average of about 10% annually in a simple index fund with 0.04% fees, you'll end up with roughly $1.1 million. But if you pay a financial advisor 1% annually to put you in actively managed funds with another 0.75% in fund fees, and those funds underperform by just 1% because of all that activity, you're now at about $730,000. The help cost you $370,000. That's not a typo. Trying to be clever about investing can literally cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. And the crazy part is, you'll feel like you're being smart the whole time because someone is managing your money. This is why I get so frustrated when I see people spending hours researching stocks or arguing about whether they should buy growth or value or international or small cap. Because all of that energy is almost certainly making them poorer, not richer. The market doesn't care how much research you did. It doesn't reward effort. It rewards patience and discipline. Here's the thing that finally made me understand this. Investing isn't like most things in life where more effort equals better results. In most areas, if you work harder, you do better. But in investing, more effort usually means worse results because more effort means more decisions. And more decisions means more opportunities for emotional mistakes. The best investors aren't the ones working the hardest. They're the ones who set up a simple system and then have the discipline to leave it alone. They're boring. They're not exciting to talk about at parties. They don't have stories about the hot stock they picked, but they're rich. And look, I know this isn't sexy, but here's the secret. There is no secret. The strategy that works is embarrassingly simple and has been publicly known for decades. The only reason it's not common practice is because Simple doesn't sell newsletters, doesn't fill 24-hour financial news channels, and doesn't justify high advisory fees. So here's my challenge to you. Prove me wrong. Set up a simple three-fund portfolio this week. Set up automatic investments, then don't touch it for a year. Just 1 year. See how it performs. See how it feels to not constantly worry about whether you're making the right moves. See how much time you get back by not researching stocks and watching market news. And if you're still convinced after a year that you need to be doing something more complex, fine. You can always add complexity later. But I'm willing to bet that what you'll actually discover is that the simple approach not only works better, it's also liberating. Because you'll stop feeling guilty about not doing enough. The reason investing feels hard is because you're trying to solve a complex problem with complex solutions. But the actual problem is simple. You need your money to grow faster than inflation over time. And the solution is equally simple. Buy assets that grow faster than inflation, hold them for a while, and don't do anything stupid in between. That's it. That's the entire game. If this video made you realize you've been overcomplicating investing, hit that like button and subscribe because I'm making videos like this every week about the simple truths that the financial industry doesn't want you to know. And drop a comment letting me know if you're finally going to start that simple portfolio you've been putting off. Now go set up that account. You've literally got no excuse anymore. You've got this.